Okay, we are going into the last hour of today's lecture, and now we are switching gears. I just fast forwarded to this part where Damien will describe in more details how a more real-world application would look like. So now we are leaving Hello World land and we are entering real Web API land. Let's see how this looks like.
Okay, so this was empty web. Obviously, this is where people start. Let's have a look at where you might end up going. So I have this playground repo where I've been experimenting with these features as they get built in the daily builds, and then also as a quasi set of examples of what the type of thing that you can do.
What I recommend is that you might write down this GitHub repository, Damien Edwards Minimal API Playground, because he has a lot of interesting examples in this repository. Of course, you also get official samples from my side in our course repository, but I mean, Damien is part of the ASP.NET team, so in his repo you will even see the more leading edge and cooler stuff that I can ever show you.
Quickly, if you want to use these nightly builds I keep talking about, you can go to the .NET/installer repo on GitHub. And then if you scroll down in the README, if you're on Windows, this is the link you want right here, which gives you the Windows x64 installer for the main branch.
Please do not what Damien is telling you here, because this is only relevant if you want to use the bleeding edge part of .NET, so the nightly build where you can expect a lot of errors to be in. So use the release candidate version that is officially already there. This is just if you want to follow Damien and try whatever he does on a daily basis.
Which is the latest. And if you click on installer, it'll download the MSI. So minimal API playground on the Damien Edwards repo. What is in here? So if I go into source, I've got three folders here, or three projects. One is the playground where I've just got like a whole bunch of random stuff, including stuff that will probably never ship, some experiments, some things where I hide things away to make it look like it's in the framework, but it's not, And then a couple that are a little more pared down, a little more realistic. So
there's an interesting one here. Have you ever heard of Dapper? D-A-P-P-E-R, you see it on the screen? No? Dapper is a minimal object relational mapper. I think it's from the Stack Overflow team. So if I can remember correctly, it's from the Stack Overflow team. And what you have, it's a simplified, light-weighted entity framework if you want. You can still write SQL, but you get a lot of the goodness that entity framework gives you. So if you don't like entity framework because it's too complicated and too large for what you want to do, if you are in love with SQL, maybe some of you are, I definitely am, I love SQL, then Dapper might be exactly what you're looking for. For this course, I will require you to use Entity Framework. I'm very sorry, because this is part of the curriculum. But in the real world, Dapper is definitely a very good alternative if you need something small and more lightweight than Entity Framework. Okay? Very simple to use.
For example, a to-do application that uses Dapper for data persistence. And you can see in here, like, it has one file. It has program.cs. The whole app is just one file. And if I open on that, you can see it's using a bunch of the stuff we talked about. I don't have any using statements for ASP.NET or for like system or system.threading or any of the typical stuff. They're implied because I get those from the implicit usings feature. But then I've just imported the things that are unique to my program. So my usings is a lot more cleaner, right? So then you see your builder application like that we showed before. And then in this phase here, before I call build, I'm adding my types to the DI container so that they're available later on in the application.
This is dependency injection. This is what we did before with configure services. And this is how we will also add entity framework to our dependency injection system. So everything is in program.cs. By the way, Damien in his demo repo has also an example for entity framework. So we have both Dapper and entity framework, but with entity framework, it's very similar.
In this case, because I'm using Dapper, I just have to add the SQLite connection type, and then I use a factory.
Are you familiar with SQLite? Does anybody know SQLite? No? Oh, you should. SQLite is a really, really interesting relational database, similar to SQL or MySQL or Postgres. Do you know what the special thing with SQLite is? It's extremely, as the name suggests, light. So you don't have any database server. If you want to access this SQLite database, then you take the DLLs from NuGet and you have the entire database in your app. You do not need to run a server. Your app can directly access the SQLite database. And the SQLite database physically is nothing else than a file. Understand what I mean? So you don't need a server, you just access the file. It's a good alternative. Here in this course, we are going to use SQL Server because it's part of the curriculum. But if you want just to try something, SQLite is a perfect option.
Here, so that every time someone asks for a SQLite connection, I'll run this delegate and it'll just create a new SQLite connection using this connection string, which I've hard-coded in this case. And then once it's built, we'll ignore EnsureDB. You see the typical type of stuff that you may have seen in your startup class before. But to Stefan's point now, you're going to see some more advanced examples.
I want to quickly jump out of the video here because Damien is getting more into Dapper and things like that. We can also, because we are just curious, see how Dapper works. You see, this is just for your interest. It's not relevant for the course and the exam. This is Dapper. And you see here, in contrast to entity framework, you really have plain SQL in C#. You're not using ling with types and data types. You really add strings, you see it here, as SQL statements. Select, insert, update, delete. And that's what Dapper is all about. It's like entity framework, but without ling. You just write SQL and you execute it. The rest is very similar. Got it? Okay. So let's jump out of the video here for a second. We'll see how much time we have. And I would like to show you the example that I have put into the GitHub repository. So let's open it up here. Let me quickly show you that. If we go into our GitHub repository for this course, here it is. Under lectures, you find ASP.NET Minimal, and this is the program.cs that I'm going to show you now inside of my Visual Studio. It works with the latest release candidate bits, so there is nothing missing. You should be able to compile it and to work with it. It's a very good option. Let me quickly build this so the red squigglies go away. Good. I think now it's better. Let's rebuild it again. Sorry for the short delay. Rebuild all succeeded. Red squigglies are gone. Awesome. You see, this is the web application create builder. This is dependency injection. In this example, I add entity framework. Add DB context, just like we had it last year. I added entity framework with SQL Server. I hope you can remember from our lectures last year how this works. Can you remember? Add the data classes, add the data context, use .NET EF migration add, use .NET EF database update, and things like that. This hasn't changed at all. But then you put everything here just in this line here. There is something new, which is pretty new, and I recommend to give it a try. There is a new NuGet package. It's not a must. It's an optional thing, which is called ASP.NET Core Diagnostics Entity Framework Core. This is a new NuGet package, and if you add this guy and call add database developer page exception filter, very long method name, you know what this does? Whenever you have a mistake in the database, because you forgot to run database update or something like this, you get a meaningful error message. So it helps you diagnose misconfigurations in terms of entity framework. So it can be a lifesaver for your exam or your Matura. So when I create the template solution for you for the Matura, for instance, I would definitely add this one. Because if you get something, you get a meaningful error message. It's of course optional. This is Swagger, Open API specification. By now, from last year, you should remember what the Open API specification is. It's pretty simple, just these 2 lines and we are good. Then we have the map builder, and these are the things that we had before, nothing special. But now we will see the more complicated stuff. Please take a look at this function here. This function takes in the EF entity framework context as a parameter. This is dependency injection in the new world. You just take the database context as a parameter to your handler function for map_get, and you're done. That's it. Now you just need to write the link query. In this case, it's just give me all to-dos, and you're done. You can add some additional metadata for Swagger, in this case just naming the endpoint, and that's it. No attributes, no complicated classes, nothing like that. Understood? Let's take a look at the second one. No, not the second one. This one. This is good. Map to-dos ID. In this case, we get 2 parameters. You see it here? The second one, this is the easy one because we just had it. It's the EF context, just as we had before. But the first one is interesting. Do you see here that we have this int ID here? So if the names match, the value is automatically transferred into your variable. Got it? Very nice. Now we need to write the link query, which is, in this case, just find async. It looks for a primary key. And if it found the item, so if it didn't return null, now comes something new, we can return OK or not found. But please note results. This is new. This is also very new in the new minimal API. You can always call the results class to return the result. Results.OK, results not found, results bad request, results whatever you want to return. Understand what I mean? Can you remember the HTTP status codes? If you can't, let me exactly. HTTP status cats. HTTP status codes. Continue, created, accepted, or the obvious 418, I'm a teapot, of course. This is not a joke. This is a real HTTP, a standardized HTTP status code. I'm a teapot. It's real. Yeah. Of course, it is not real, but it's part of the standard. Okay, you see? This is where the results come in. So if I press results dot, I get, see, accepted, created, I can return JSON, no content, not found, problem, and so on. Unauthorized, whatever you want to return, you can find it in the results class. So please remember the results class. It's important. Yes, question?
You have to declare a DB variable, or how does the function get?
Very good question. Here, you see that we added the entity framework data context just like we did it last year. So you say add DB context to do DB. Please remember this class name. This is the entity framework data context. I called it to do DB. Now if I scroll down, you will see that we have the same data type here. The name doesn't matter. You can call it Hansi if you want. I don't care. We don't have a Hansi here. Yeah? Call it dummy. You can call it whatever you want. The data type is the important thing. It's different with the routes. So if you take a look at the routing here, this one and this one, here the name matters. Understood?
Yes.
Good. Question?
Is it can have a different name?
Then the route variable, yes, it is possible. What you can do is you can say from path, I think it is. Let me see. From route. Yes, you are right. Thank you. And here you can define a name. See that one? And then you can call this one dummy. Okay? Is this what you wanted to know?
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. You can do that. The principle that you see here in action is called, whoops. No. Yes. Convention over configuration. That means if you don't configure something, there is a naming convention. So by default, you follow the convention. But you can configure something when you want to do something differently. Okay? Good. Nice. Good question, by the way. Thank you very much. Then we can also add some additional data for Swagger. This is the produces stuff here. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. This one. The map post. Oh, I don't zoom in. I want you to take a look at this one. We already know what ToDoDB is. It comes from dependency injection because it's the entity framework data context. But now we have another important, an important case here. We have a second type with the name ToDo. Is ToDo a query string, a path route parameter? No, it is not. Obviously not, because there are no parameters here. So where does ToDo come from? It's not from DI, it's not from the path, but from the body. Exactly, and that is the convention here. If the new map, post, get, patch, whatever, finds a data type and a name which does not match to a dependency injection element, which does not map to a path parameter, then the system assumes that this comes from the body. You can be, again, explicit about that. You can do something like this to specify explicitly that you want the to-do item to come from the body. You can write that if you want, but it's not necessary. Got it? Good. Nice, nice. And of course, we can do a map put for an HTTP put request. And we can, I think down here, a map delete if you want, and another map delete for delete all. Down here, you see the typical entity framework code with the data class here. This is the data class, and the database context. Very simple, exactly in the same way as we did it last year. So I have a question to you. I would like to hear your opinion. See, this API is now under 150 lines of code. But on the other hand, we have business logic, as you can see here, configuration, as you can see up here, data, as you can see it here, and data access code, as you can see it here, in a single file. Some people would consider that spaghetti code. What do you think? What is your opinion about it? Is this spaghetti code? Is this bad code? Do you want to program like that because it's just one file because it's so simple? Or do you consider that a bad practice and you would prefer multiple files, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 files, where each file only has 10 or 20 lines? What is your opinion? I would like to hear your opinion on that. Very good thought. For learning, that's a good approach. I agree. I also agree to a certain extent what you said about bigger projects. But there is a trend in the current IT towards so-called microservices. Have you ever heard about microservices before? I think you can guess it from the context. What is a microservice? Well, a small service, right? So what people are doing nowadays when it comes to software architecture, they are taking a huge software project and they are splitting it up in small services, where each service is only responsible for a very specific task. This is a microservice. It has a narrow scope, it is small, it can be written fast, and if you don't need it anymore, you can throw it away. So if you consider a microservice architecture, where you maybe work in a huge enterprise, but you have a very narrow task. You need to provide a service for, I don't know, some master data management, Stammdatenverwaltung, where you can save, I don't know, a list of supported currencies in that enterprise. It's not complicated. So in such a concept, in a microservice world, you could consider a large project just a collection of small projects. And then this will come in handy too. Understand what I mean? But in general, I fully agree to what you said. Absolutely. The difficulty for you as the first class in this year is for your exams and for your matura, you have to decide. I will not make the decision for you. Microsoft is consciously opening up possibilities. If you watch the video to the end, Damien is emphasizing that. They are no longer telling you what to do. You can use this API or you can use the old API. It's not old, it's established. It works. It works really well. And you as the developer, you have the choice. So at the Matura and also at the exam, I will accept both. Both are fine. For this homework, if you take a look at the requirements, I explicitly want you to try the new way. Just so that you have tried it. But when it comes to exams, this is how it is. You have to make the decision and you have to live with it. Understand? In real world, this is what makes development interesting. You as the developer, you are constantly making decisions. And this is a question of software design, not a matter of syntax and so on. Everything else regarding entity framework works exactly as we had it before. Next week, we will do a recap on entity framework. And of course, I'm going to show you new things, new features in entity framework too. Because entity framework core 6 has also gotten more interesting and more elaborate. But that is a topic for next week. Everything else, just as before. So what you could still do, if you can remember, you could say .NET EF migration add something. Just the same tools as before. It works exactly as before, also with a minimal API. I hope I didn't screw up. I didn't change anything, so it should just either give me a warning or just succeed. Yes, nothing happened.
Yeah, and as far as the people who are looking for like different ways to organize their project, one thing that I would like to point out, which is a thing that I think we have trouble communicating because we're introducing this new host along with these like new map get and map post overloads at the same time. And since we're excited about both, we tend to present them together. These map get and map post functions are just extension methods on endpoint route builder, right? So in your startup class, you can call use endpoints, you can get your endpoint builder, and you can call all these same methods and get all the, new, service.
Let's take a look at what Steven is currently saying here. What he says is that mapget, this one, is really an extension method. If we take a look at where mapget is defined, here it is, on a new class which is called delegate endpoint route builder extensions. Let's quickly dissect this name. Delegate. We already heard the definition of a delegate. It's a function reference, that's correct. Delegate endpoint, endpoint route. That is exactly what we had before with the slash and slash hello and with all this stuff. And of course the builder stuff. So what this new class is all about is it adds route support for delegates and no longer classes. And this is the big difference to before. Before we had, let's go here, before we had these controller classes, and now we have the delegates. And this is why we get a delegate endpoint route handler. Understand? So this is what Stephen is pointing out. These are new extension methods which are behind the scenes implemented by this class, which I, by the way, got by pressing F12, and it shows me the implementation. By the way, if you want to take a look at the code of base class library or ASP.NET or whatever, what is the easiest way to take a look into the code for .NET? The code that Microsoft has written. Reference source, it was the old world. Reference source is for the .NET framework. Now it's just called source.net. You type in source.net and then you type in the name of the class that you are interested in. Let's, for instance, say we want to learn about date time. I click on it, see here, and you can now take a look at the source code directly from Microsoft. On the right-hand side, you can click on the method view, and on the right-hand side, you can click on the Project Explorer, and then you will see the different files in the Microsoft base class library in this case, you see? And you can read every single line of code that Microsoft has. And the beautiful thing here is that this is all equipped with hyperlinks. So if you want to take a look at the code of argument out of range exception, you can just click on it, and it will immediately bring you to the source code where you can take a look at this stuff. Got it? Source.net. Interesting thing. So if you want to know the details about what Stephen is telling you here or any other class, you can use source.net.
Service injection into parameters into mapget and all that kind of stuff, without necessarily even having to use like the new web application builder. Also, for those of you who might be interested in like using these kind of new features, but want to initialize a class, we have a new public type called request delegate factory that these new like mapkit map post overloads use internally, and that gives you even more control. So you have a lot of options kind of how to compose these pieces. It's not all or nothing. You can kind of take the bits you like, but you know, for this community stand-up, Damien showing, you know, all the new hotness.
The things that Stephen is now referring to are internals. He describes that people can take what Microsoft has built and build their own frameworks on top of it. So what you can do is you can tweak every little thing using the mechanisms that Stephen is currently describing here. You can take the new stuff and embed it into the old stuff. This is probably not relevant for you. We will not do that in this course, but it's interesting for you to understand that there are people out there who are watching this video and who will immediately take a look at Microsoft, at how Microsoft built it, and build different frameworks, advanced frameworks, more abstract frameworks on top of it.
And if you're really advanced and you want to go like full on, you could just look at the source code for request delegate factory and say, I want to invent my own set of conventions for the types of delegates or methods that I want to be able to be turned in and plugged directly into the middleware pipeline, and just copy the code that you want from request delegate factory and make your own. Like, we don't support...
Can you remember what I told you? Simple things must be simple, complex things must be possible. And that is exactly what we are hearing here now. Okay, I think with that, I've watched the video until the end of course already a few weeks ago, and I think the stuff that is now coming is very deep dive, it's very internal, it's not really relevant for this course anymore. So we will stop here for the video, and I will summarize for today. So my goal, let's get rid of that here. My goal of today was to recap ASP.NET Core, to introduce you to some new concepts, and also to go into the curriculum topic of software architecture, API design, and things like that. Not in theory, but looking at how a large company does that in practice. That was the goal of today, okay? I hope the kind of teaching with the video was interesting for you, right? You get the recording, of course. It will be on YouTube. You have my sample solution in the GitHub repo. And you have the homework, which is due to next week. So I ask you to do this homework. I will take a random look at 2 or 3 of the homeworks, as always. And if you think you earned the extra points, send me a note so I can award you with these extra points if you solve the extra challenges. With that, I would like to close the content for today. We have 10 minutes left. If you want, you can already start with the homework for the final 10 minutes. And I would like to officially close for today. See you next week.